The crisp morning air of London carried a distinct chill as Kate Middleton stepped out of her car onto the busy streets of the city. Wrapped in a sleek wool coat and a delicate scarf, her demeanor was as poised as ever, embodying the grace and humility that had made her beloved by millions. On this particular day, Kate had chosen to visit a community center known for its work with vulnerable families. It was part of her ongoing efforts to shed light on the struggles faced by ordinary people, people whose lives were often overlooked in the bustling chaos of modern life. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more exclusive news. As Kate made her way down the street, her eyes were drawn to a dilapidated car parked on the side of the road. Its windows were fogged from the inside, and the vehicle itself bore the scars of time, scratches, dents, and a general air of neglect. Something about it seemed out of place, almost out of sync with the world around it. Pausing for a moment, Kate noticed movement inside the car. Curious and concerned, she took a few steps closer, careful not to startle whoever was inside. Through the frosted glass, she caught a glimpse of a young woman, likely in her early 20s, cradling a baby wrapped in a tattered blanket. The woman's face was etched with fatigue, her eyes carrying the weight of sleepless nights and relentless worry. The child, no more than a few months old, squirmed slightly in her arms, its small cries muffled by the thin walls of the car. Kate's heart clenched. She had seen poverty before, heard the stories, and met people struggling to make ends meet, but there was something profoundly raw about witnessing this moment of desperation up close. She hesitated, debating whether to approach. Would she intrude? Could she offer help without overwhelming the young mother? Gathering her resolve, Kate knocked gently on the window. The woman inside flinched, startled by the unexpected sound. She turned her head quickly, her expression a mixture of fear and defensiveness. For a moment she seemed ready to ignore the knock, but then her eyes met Kate's through the glass. There was a kindness in Kate's gaze that softened the woman's wariness. Slowly she rolled down the window, the chill of the outside air mixing with the stale warmth inside the car. "Hello," Kate said softly, her tone measured and reassuring. "I couldn't help but notice you and your baby. Are you okay? Do you need any help?" The young woman hesitated, her lips trembling as she tried to find the words. "I'm fine," she said finally, though her voice betrayed her. It was clear she was anything but fine. Kate crouched slightly, making herself less imposing, her eyes level with the woman. "My name is Kate," she continued. "I promise. I'm only here to help. What's your name?" "Emily," the woman replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced down at her baby, her hand instinctively pulling the blanket tighter around the child. "Emily," Kate repeated, her smile gentle and sincere. "It's very cold out here. Would you let me help you find somewhere warmer for you and your baby?" Emily's defenses began to crumble. Tears welled up in her eyes as she nodded, unable to hold back the emotions that had been building for what seemed like an eternity. Kate immediately sprang into action. She signaled to her security team, who maintained a discreet distance, and within moments arrangements were made to transport Emily and her baby to a nearby shelter. During the short drive, Kate sat beside Emily, listening intently as the young mother shared her story. Emily had once had a steady job and a modest apartment, but a series of unfortunate events, a sudden layoff, a medical emergency, and the untimely death of her partner, had left her spiraling into homelessness. With no family to turn to and no savings to fall back on, she had been living in her car for weeks, doing her best to care for her infant son Ethan, despite the dire circumstances. By the time they arrived at the shelter, Kate had already decided that she wouldn't stop at simply dropping Emily off. She wanted to ensure that the young mother and her baby had every opportunity to rebuild their lives. The shelter staff, accustomed to working with families in crisis, welcomed Emily warmly, offering her a private room, clean clothes, and a hot meal. Kate stayed for hours, speaking with the staff and learning about the challenges they faced in supporting people like Emily. She was struck by the stories she heard. Stories of resilience and hope, but also of systemic barriers that made it nearly impossible for many to escape the cycle of poverty. That evening, after returning to Kensington Palace, Kate couldn't shake the image of Emily and Ethan huddled together in that cold, cramped car. She shared the day's events with Prince William, her voice filled with determination. "We have to do something more," she said. "This can't just be one good deed. There are so many Emilys out there, so many Ethans." Over the following weeks, Kate took action. She reached out to charitable organizations, government officials, and business leaders, rallying support for a new initiative aimed at addressing homelessness among young families. The project, which she named Haven for Families, sought to provide not only emergency shelter, but also comprehensive support services, including job training, childcare, mental health counseling, and access to affordable housing. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in, and volunteers signed up in droves. Kate personally visited shelters and spoke at events, sharing Emily's story, not to sensationalize it, but to humanize the issue and inspire others to act. Emily, meanwhile, was thriving. With the support of the shelter and the resources provided by Haven for Families, she found a part-time job and began attending evening classes to complete her education. Ethan, now a bright-eyed toddler, brought joy to everyone he met, his laughter a testament to the power of second chances. Months later, Kate invited Emily and Ethan to a special event at Kensington Palace, a celebration of the progress made by Haven for Families. As Emily stood on stage sharing her journey with the audience, she glanced over at Kate, who was watching her with pride. "You gave me hope when I had none," Emily said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Because of you, my son has a future, and because of Haven for Families, I have the tools to build that future." The room erupted into applause, but Kate's thoughts were elsewhere. She knew that there was still so much work to be done. For every success story like Emily's, there were countless others still waiting for their chance. But that day she allowed herself a moment of gratitude. Sometimes, she reflected, the most profound changes begin with a simple act of kindness. A knock on a fogged car window, a conversation, a choice to see and to care. And in that moment, she knew she would never stop fighting for those who needed her most. The event at Kensington Palace marked a turning point, not just for Emily and her son Ethan, but for countless families who had been inspired by the initiative. However, what resonated most deeply with Kate was how the story had awakened a broader conversation across the nation. People were beginning to question the systems that allowed families to fall through the cracks and were demanding actionable change. As Kate returned to her daily responsibilities, the memory of that frosted car window lingered in her mind. It wasn't just about Emily and Ethan. It was about all the unseen lives hidden behind similar glass barriers. Determined to use her platform to its fullest potential, Kate dove deeper into her work, exploring the roots of homelessness and advocating for long-term solutions that tackled the issue from every angle. One morning, as she sat in her study, Kate leafed through pages of reports sent by researchers, economists, and social workers. They painted a bleak picture: housing costs outpacing wages, limited access to childcare forcing parents to choose between work and family, and inadequate mental health services leaving vulnerable individuals unsupported. Each statistic felt like a story waiting to be told, a cry for help from someone like Emily. That same week, Kate visited a transitional housing facility in Birmingham. This program, unlike traditional shelters, provided longer-term support for families as they regained stability. The facility was brightly lit and welcoming, a sharp contrast to the despair often associated with homelessness. There, Kate met Samantha, a young woman who had been living on the streets with her two daughters before finding refuge. Samantha's story echoed Emily's, but with an added layer of trauma. She had fled an abusive relationship, choosing safety over stability. With no family to turn to, she had spent months couch surfing before finally ending up in the shelter system. Tears filled Samantha's eyes as she recounted the first time her daughters slept in a real bed after weeks on the move. "People don't understand how quickly it can happen," Samantha said, her voice trembling. "One bad month. That's all it takes to lose everything." Kate listened intently, her expression a mix of empathy and determination. She asked about the challenges Samantha faced even now, as she worked to rebuild her life. What Samantha shared would shape the next phase of Kate's efforts. "It's not just about shelter," Samantha explained. "It's about what happens after. I can't afford daycare, so I can't work full-time. And even if I find work, I can't save enough for a deposit on a flat. It feels like I'm running in circles." Kate left the facility with a deeper understanding of the interconnected challenges faced by families like Samantha's. That evening, she convened a meeting with her team and representatives from charities and government agencies. The focus was clear: breaking the cycle of poverty and ensuring that families didn't just survive but thrived. The result of these discussions was the Family Forward Initiative, an ambitious program aimed at addressing systemic barriers to stability. The initiative included subsidies for childcare, partnerships with employers to provide flexible work arrangements, and incentives for landlords to offer affordable housing to families transitioning out of homelessness. While the initiative gained momentum, Kate continued to meet with families directly. She believed that their stories were the key to building empathy and inspiring action. One such family was the Thompsons, who had been evicted from their home due to skyrocketing rent increases. They were now living in a cramped motel room, sharing one bed among 4 people. "What hurts the most," Mr. Thompson confided, "is feeling like a failure in front of my kids. They don't understand why we can't go back home." Kate spent hours with the family, listening to their fears and frustrations. Their children, despite their circumstances, clung to an unwavering optimism that brought tears to Kate's eyes. She knew that their innocence would fade if the world continued to fail them. It was moments like these that spurred Kate to push harder. She began collaborating with educators to ensure that children experiencing homelessness didn't fall behind in school. Mobile tutoring programs were introduced, bringing teachers to shelters and motels to provide one-on-one support. Kate also worked to expand meal programs, ensuring that no child went to bed hungry. In the months that followed, Kate's efforts began to yield tangible results. The Family Forward Initiative had provided housing for over 500 families, and dozens of parents had re-entered the workforce with the help of childcare subsidies. The media, captivated by the Duchess's relentless advocacy, began highlighting stories of transformation, families who had gone from the brink of despair to newfound hope. However, Kate was not one to rest on her laurels. During a visit to a rural community in Yorkshire, she encountered another layer of the issue that she hadn't fully grasped before. In areas far removed from urban centers, resources were scarce, and families often had to travel hours to access basic services. The isolation only compounded the struggles of poverty. It was here that Kate met Marcus, a single father raising 2 boys after the sudden death of his wife. Marcus had lost his job shortly after her passing and was now living in a caravan with his sons. He described the stigma of asking for help in a tight-knit community where everyone knew each other. "People look at you differently when they know you're struggling," Marcus said. "It's like they're waiting for you to fail." Kate was deeply moved by his resilience and the quiet strength with which he approached each day. She left Yorkshire determined to expand her efforts to rural areas, where the challenges were different but no less urgent. Soon, mobile resource centers began rolling out across the countryside, bringing medical care, job training, and legal assistance to families in need. These brightly colored vans became a symbol of hope, often greeted with tears and gratitude as they pulled into remote villages. Despite the progress, Kate knew the journey was far from over. One evening, as she prepared for a televised address to discuss the issue, she reflected on how far things had come since that fateful day she knocked on Emily's car window. The address was watched by millions, and Kate's words resonated deeply. Every family deserves the chance to live with dignity, to feel secure, and to hope for a brighter future. This is not about charity, it's about justice. It's about recognizing the humanity in every person and refusing to turn away when we see someone in need. The speech sparked a wave of public engagement, with ordinary citizens stepping up to help in their own communities. Schools held fundraisers to support local shelters, businesses offered job training programs, and landlords began working with housing organizations to provide more affordable options. Through it all, Kate remained a constant presence. She continued visiting shelters, meeting with families, and listening to their stories. Each encounter reinforced her belief that real change was possible, but it required collective effort. 1 year after the launch of Haven for Families, a gala was held to celebrate its achievements. Emily, now working as a counselor for families in crisis, was one of the speakers. As she stood on stage, her son Ethan toddling beside her, she addressed the crowd with a voice full of gratitude and determination. "Because someone cared enough to see me, to really see me, my life changed," Emily said, "and now it's my turn to pay it forward. Together, we can make sure no one else has to feel invisible. Kate, watching from the audience, felt a swell of pride. This was the legacy she wanted to leave, not just for herself, but for her children and for the countless families who deserved a chance to thrive. As the evening drew to a close, Kate stepped outside into the cool night air. Looking up at the stars, she felt a profound sense of purpose. The work was hard, the challenges immense, but the impact was undeniable. Sometimes, she thought, change begins with something as small as a knock on a window, and sometimes that small act of kindness can ripple outward, transforming not just one life but many. The progress made by Kate Middleton's initiatives was undeniable, but the deeper she delved into the complexities of homelessness and poverty, the more she realized how intricate the web of challenges truly was. Each story she encountered illuminated a new gap in the system, a new layer of difficulty that required innovative solutions. With every step forward, Kate was learning that addressing homelessness required not just compassion, but also ingenuity, persistence, and a willingness to tackle uncomfortable truths. During a visit to a bustling metropolitan shelter in Manchester, Kate sat down with social workers who shared their concerns about the growing prevalence of mental health issues among homeless families. These challenges, they explained, were often invisible yet deeply debilitating, preventing individuals from taking the steps needed to improve their circumstances. Mothers and fathers battling depression or anxiety frequently struggled to access the help they needed, let alone hold down jobs or navigate the complexities of securing housing. Without mental health support, everything else becomes harder, one counselor told her. It's like asking someone to run a marathon with a broken leg. This insight struck a chord with Kate, who had long championed mental health awareness as part of her broader advocacy work. She recognized that while practical support like housing and childcare was vital, it would never fully address the problem if people were left grappling with untreated trauma or overwhelming stress. Determined to bridge this gap, Kate worked closely with mental health professionals to design a program specifically tailored to the needs of families experiencing homelessness. The program, called Safe Minds, provided on-site counseling at shelters, as well as free therapy sessions for parents and children transitioning into stable housing. One of the program's early participants was Maria, a mother of 3 who had fled domestic violence and spent months living in temporary accommodations. Maria shared with Kate how the constant instability had taken a toll on her mental health, leaving her feeling paralyzed with fear and unable to plan for the future. Every day felt like survival mode, Maria said, her voice trembling. I couldn't think beyond the next meal or the next night. Through the Safe Minds program, Maria was paired with a therapist who helped her process her trauma and rebuild her confidence. Over time, she began to rediscover her sense of agency, setting small goals for herself and taking steps toward achieving them. By the time Kate met Maria, she had secured a stable job and was saving to move into a home of her own. Kate was deeply moved by Maria's transformation, but she knew that such successes required sustained effort and investment. To ensure the longevity of Safe Minds, she spearheaded a campaign to integrate mental health services into all shelters across the country. The initiative gained widespread support, with donors, policymakers, and healthcare professionals rallying behind the cause. At the same time, Kate's advocacy began to shine a light on another critical issue: the plight of young people who aged out of foster care and found themselves at heightened risk of homelessness. These young adults, often without family support or financial resources, were particularly vulnerable to falling through the cracks. During a visit to a youth center in Edinburgh, Kate met Liam, a 19-year-old who had spent his childhood bouncing between foster homes. After aging out of the system, Liam struggled to find work and ended up living on the streets. He described the profound sense of isolation he felt and the stigma that came with being homeless at such a young age. No one wants to hire someone who doesn't have an address, Liam said. And without a job, how do you get one? Kate was struck by the vicious cycle Liam described and resolved to take action. She partnered with organizations specializing in youth development to create a mentorship and apprenticeship program called Pathways to Promise. The program connected young people like Liam with mentors who provided guidance and support as they navigated the transition into adulthood. Participants also gained access to job training, financial literacy workshops, and subsidized housing, giving them a foundation on which to build their futures. Liam became one of the program's early success stories. With the help of his mentor, he secured an apprenticeship in carpentry and began saving for his own apartment. When Kate visited him months later, he proudly showed her a small table he had built himself, a tangible symbol of the skills and confidence he had gained. While these individual successes were heartening, Kate remained acutely aware of the broader systemic issues that perpetuated homelessness. One recurring theme was the lack of affordable housing, particularly in urban areas where demand far outpaced supply. Families were being priced out of their communities, forced to choose between paying rent and meeting other basic needs. To address this, Kate launched a Housing Innovation Challenge, inviting architects, developers, and urban planners to propose creative solutions for increasing affordable housing stock. The challenge resulted in a range of groundbreaking ideas, from modular housing units that could be assembled quickly and cost-effectively to community land trusts that prioritized long-term affordability. One particularly innovative project involved repurposing unused office buildings into mixed-use developments that combined residential units with community spaces and childcare facilities. Kate visited one such development during its construction phase, donning a hard hat as she toured the site. The project's lead architect explained how the design prioritized both functionality and dignity, ensuring that families would feel proud of their homes. "We want to create spaces where people can thrive, not just survive," the architect said. As these efforts gained momentum, Kate continued to use her platform to amplify the voices of those affected by homelessness. She collaborated with filmmakers to produce a documentary series that followed several families over the course of a year, capturing both their struggles and their triumphs. The series, titled Invisible No More, aired on national television and sparked a wave of public engagement. Viewers were particularly moved by the story of Grace, a teenage girl who had spent much of her childhood in shelters. Despite the instability, Grace had excelled academically, earning a scholarship to university. In one poignant scene, she described how the support of her mother and teachers had fueled her determination to succeed. "I want people to know that just because someone's homeless doesn't mean they're not capable," Grace said. "We have dreams too." The series not only raised awareness but also inspired concrete action. Donations to homelessness charities surged, and volunteers flooded shelters offering their time and skills. Employers began reaching out to hire participants in programs like Pathways to Promise, and landlords expressed interest in working with housing initiatives to provide more affordable options. As the movement grew, Kate found herself reflecting on how far things had come since that cold morning when she first met Emily and Ethan. But she also knew that the work was far from finished. True systemic change required not only grassroots efforts, but also sustained commitment from policymakers. Her efforts culminated in a meeting with the Prime Minister, during which she presented her vision for a society where no one was left behind. The meeting resulted in a commitment to increase funding for homelessness prevention programs and to prioritize affordable housing in urban planning initiatives. Kate's advocacy also extended beyond the UK. Recognizing that homelessness was a global issue, she partnered with international organizations to share best practices and collaborate on solutions. During a visit to a shelter in Mumbai, she met women who had escaped cycles of generational poverty thanks to microfinance initiatives and community support networks. Inspired by their resilience, Kate began exploring ways to adapt these models for use in the UK. Throughout it all, Kate remained deeply involved on a personal level. She continued visiting shelters, attending community meetings, and spending time with families who were rebuilding their lives. These moments kept her grounded and reminded her of the human impact behind every policy and program. One evening, as Kate sat in a modest shelter kitchen helping a group of children decorate gingerbread cookies, she was struck by how simple acts of care could create a sense of normalcy even in difficult circumstances. She realized that while systemic change was crucial, so too were the small, everyday gestures that reminded people they were seen and valued. As Kate reflected on the journey, she felt a profound sense of purpose. She knew that the road ahead would be long, but she also knew that every step mattered, whether it was knocking on a fogged car window, advocating for policy change, or simply sitting down to listen. She was committed to making a difference. Because sometimes, she thought, the smallest acts of kindness can spark the greatest transformations. And in a world that so often overlooks its most vulnerable, choosing to care is the most powerful act of all. As Kate Middleton's efforts to combat homelessness continued to expand, the ripple effects reached far beyond the families directly involved in her programs. Communities began to change in tangible ways, not just through infrastructure and policies, but in the very attitudes of the people. The stigma surrounding homelessness, a barrier as formidable as poverty itself, began to erode, replaced by a growing culture of empathy and action. One of the most striking changes was the way local businesses began to take a proactive role in supporting vulnerable populations. Inspired by Kate's leadership, small business owners began hosting job fairs specifically for individuals transitioning out of homelessness. A bakery in Liverpool, for example, started a program to train and hire people from shelters, providing them with stable employment and a renewed sense of purpose. Similar initiatives sprouted across the country, creating a network of businesses that not only offered jobs but also mentorship and community. Kate visited several of these businesses, speaking with employees who had once felt discarded by society, but now thrived in environments that valued their potential. One man, Peter, who had spent years battling addiction before finding work at a coffee shop, shared his story with Kate during one such visit. "This place didn't just give me a paycheck," Peter said. "It gave me my dignity back." Kate was deeply moved by his words. Stories like Peter's reaffirmed her belief that addressing homelessness required not just charity, but opportunity. Opportunities for people to rebuild their lives with pride and purpose. As Kate's initiatives gained momentum, she began focusing on fostering collaboration between different sectors of society. She organized a groundbreaking summit at Windsor Castle, bringing together leaders from government, business, nonprofits, and academia. The goal was to break down silos and create a unified strategy for addressing homelessness in the UK. The event was a resounding success, with attendees forming new partnerships and pledging resources to tackle the issue from multiple angles. One of the most innovative ideas to emerge from the summit was a proposal to create a national database of resources for homeless individuals and families. This centralized platform would connect people in need with available housing, job opportunities, mental health services, and childcare, streamlining access to support. Kate championed the project, ensuring it received the funding and attention it needed to become a reality. Beyond her work with organizations and policymakers, Kate remained deeply committed to personal connections with those she sought to help. During a visit to a community in Wales, she met an elderly woman named Margaret, who had recently been housed after years of living on the streets. Margaret, a former teacher, had fallen into homelessness after a series of health issues and financial setbacks. "I thought I was invisible," Margaret told Kate, "but you've made people like me feel seen again." Margaret's story resonated deeply with Kate, who later remarked to her team that it was a reminder of the diversity of experiences behind homelessness. The elderly, the disabled, and those with chronic illnesses often faced unique challenges that required tailored solutions. In response, Kate initiated a campaign to address the specific needs of older adults experiencing homelessness, including programs to provide assisted living accommodations and healthcare support. Another breakthrough came when Kate collaborated with artists and musicians to create a cultural movement around homelessness awareness. A national art exhibition titled "Home is More Than a Place" featured works created by individuals who had experienced homelessness. The exhibition toured major cities, drawing thousands of visitors and raising funds for shelters and support programs. At the opening of the exhibition, Kate delivered a heartfelt speech. "Art allows us to see the world through someone else's eyes," she said. "It reminds us that behind every statistic is a story, a voice, a person who deserves to be heard." The exhibition not only raised awareness, but also gave participants a platform to share their journeys and talents. For many, it was a turning point, a chance to reclaim their narratives and redefine themselves not as victims, but as creators. As the second year of her initiatives drew to a close, Kate reflected on the progress that had been made. Homelessness rates were declining, families were finding stability, and communities were coming together in ways she had only dreamed of when she first knocked on Emily's car window. Yet she knew there was still much work to be done. One cold December evening, Kate stood outside a shelter in London. watching as volunteers handed out hot meals and blankets to those still waiting for their chance at stability. Among the crowd, she noticed a young boy clutching a toy truck, a simple gift that had been donated earlier that day. His laughter echoed through the crisp air, a poignant reminder of the resilience and joy that could persist even in the hardest circumstances. In that moment, Kate reaffirmed her commitment to the cause. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she also knew that every effort, every conversation, every act of kindness contributed to something greater. Change isn't always about grand gestures, she thought. Sometimes it's about showing up, listening, and refusing to look away. And so, as the city lights twinkled around her, Kate resolved to keep showing up for Emily, for Ethan, for Margaret, and for the countless others who deserve not just a home but hope. With that resolve, she walked back into the shelter, ready to continue the work that had already transformed so many lives and was poised to transform countless more. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Kate Middleton helping a homeless mother with a baby? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.